Did you know that a gripping British war film from 1964 featured Richard Attenborough's most transformative performance ever? Or that there's a gritty Malayan jungle drama where Lawrence Harvey and Richard Harris despised each other so intensely off-camera that their real-life hatred spilled into every scene? The 1960s British war film landscape is littered with masterpieces gathering dust, while Hollywood blockbusters steal the spotlight. Guns at Batasi, 1964. This explosive drama drops you into the chaos of post-colonial Africa, where a by-the-book British regimental sergeant major clashes with the new political reality. Richard Attenborough delivers the performance of his career as RSM Lauderdale, a spit-and-polish military lifer whose rigid world crumbles during a violent coup. The film was shot entirely at Pinewood Studios in England on a shoestring budget, yet you'd swear every scene was filmed in Africa. Attenborough completely disappears into his role, transforming from his naturally soft-spoken self into a barking, disciplined NCO who'd rather die than dishonor the uniform. His "I was born across the road from Wellington Barracks" monologue became legendary in British cinema. Martin Scorsese himself included this forgotten masterpiece on his personal list of essential British films, while Quentin Tarantino later discovered and championed it as criminally underrated. Critics praised it as a working example of the British Army in its dying days of world domination, with Attenborough's performance described as the best archetype of an RSM in decades of war films. The Long and the Short and the Tall, 1961. 7 dysfunctional British soldiers trapped in a Malayan jungle hut during WRUS face a moral dilemma when they capture a Japanese scout. This adaptation of Willis Hall's acclaimed stage play tosses aside the jingoistic war hero trope for something far more uncomfortable and real. Behind the scenes, the tension was explosive. Richard Todd and Lawrence Harvey reportedly detested each other, with Todd later writing in his memoirs that Harvey was impossible to work with. Director Leslie Norman was equally unhappy, having wanted Peter O'Toole, who played Bamforth in the original stage production, instead of Harvey for the pivotal role of the loudmouthed Cockney private. Despite its claustrophobic studio-bound jungle setting that betrays its theatrical origins, the film was revolutionary in showing British soldiers as deeply flawed, prejudiced, and often incompetent. One critic called it possibly the tetchiest and most oppressive war drama around, while another noted it was one of the very few films to show our boys as a bigger bunch of bastards. The film landed at number 12 in the Kine Weekly's box office hits of 1961, outperforming many bigger budget competitors. Play Dirty, 1969. This cynical desert warfare drama stars Michael Caine as a reluctant British Army captain ordered to lead a group of criminals on a suicide mission to destroy German fuel dumps in North Africa. The film deliberately subverts the heroic conventions of earlier war films, portraying military leadership as callous and the mission as an expendable diversion. Director André de Toth, who had served as a cavalry officer and survived serious wounds in WWI, brought a veteran's cynicism to the production. The film was shot in the harsh Almeria Desert in Spain, where temperatures regularly exceeded 110 degrees. Several crew members were hospitalized for heat exhaustion, lending authenticity to the characters' suffering in the unforgiving landscape. The film's bleak outlook and moral ambiguity alienated audiences expecting traditional heroics, with the controversial ending where the protagonists are accidentally killed by their own side, particularly shocking for the era. Sight and Sound called it the death knell for the glory days war film, while the New York Times criticized its relentlessly nihilistic worldview. Though a commercial disappointment, the film has been reassessed by critics as a key transitional work between the patriotic war films of the 1950s and the more cynical combat dramas that would emerge in the 1970s with the shadow of Vietnam looming over cinema. The Password is Courage, 1962. This oddly upbeat POW drama stars Dirk Bogarde as real-life British Sergeant Major Charles Coward, who repeatedly escaped from German prison camps with such frequency that his story stretches believability. What makes the film so unusual is its blend of serious war drama with moments of genuine comedy, a tonal balancing act rarely attempted in the genre. Director Andrew L. Stone filmed on location at actual former POW camps, giving the production an authenticity that studio sets couldn't match. The film didn't shy away from showing the harsh realities of prison life, but Bogarde's charismatic performance and Coward's ingenious escape methods provide genuine laughs amid the darkness. Critics were divided, with Variety calling it an uneven mix of The Great Escape and Hogan's Heroes, while the Monthly Film Bulletin praised Bogarde for finding humanity in heroism rather than just flag-waving. The film's box office performance was modest, but Coward himself, who served as technical advisor, called Bogarde's portrayal uncomfortably accurate in both my brilliance and my foolishness. The Hill, 1965. Sean Connery traded his James Bond tuxedo for a prisoner's uniform in this brutal military prison drama. Set in a North African detention camp during What II, the film follows British soldiers being punished through sadistic drills on a man-made hill in the desert heat until one prisoner dies from the abuse. Director Sidney Lumet shot in blinding Almeria, Spain, where temperatures regularly exceeded 115 degrees. The actors performed grueling hill climbing sequences without stunt doubles, often collapsing from genuine exhaustion. Connery later called it the most physically demanding role of my career and his favorite non-Bond performance. The film won the Best Screenplay Award at Cannes, but struggled commercially, releasing the same year as Connery's fourth Bond film, Thunderball. Critics recognized its significance immediately, with Pauline Kael calling it a masterclass in sustained tension and Roger Ebert praising its unflinching look at how military discipline can become indistinguishable from torture. Today, it stands as one of the most searing indictments of military authority ever filmed. The Valiant, 1962. This claustrophobic naval drama stars John Mills as the captain of the fictional HMS Valiant, a British submarine trapped on the Mediterranean seabed after striking an uncharted mine. As oxygen dwindles and tensions rise among the crew, the film becomes a powerful study of leadership under extreme pressure. Director Roy Ward Baker, who had served in the Royal Navy Film Unit during WTF, insisted on extraordinary technical accuracy, filming in actual decommissioned submarines and consulting with veteran submariners who had survived similar emergencies. The cramped conditions weren't just for show. The entire cast and crew worked in genuinely confined spaces where temperatures reached 100 degrees or sure from the lighting equipment, creating authentic sweat and tension visible in every frame. The film received praise for its technical precision, with the Times calling it a masterclass in sustained claustrophobia, while naval historian Nicholas Montserrat noted its uncommon accuracy in portraying the psychological effects of underwater entrapment. Despite strong reviews, the film was overshadowed by the more action-oriented Das Boot decades later and has been unjustly forgotten, though submarine warfare enthusiasts still consider it one of the most realistic portrayals of underwater crisis management ever filmed. The Victors, 1963. This sprawling anti-war epic follows an American infantry squad across Europe from the Sicily campaign through D-Day to the fall of Berlin. Though focused on American soldiers, the film was entirely British-made, shot at Shepperton Studios and on location in Europe, with British director Carl Foreman crafting a distinctly non-Hollywood perspective on American forces. Foreman, who had been blacklisted in Hollywood during the McCarthy era, brought a politically charged sensibility to the production. The film's most controversial sequence, where American soldiers are forced to witness the execution of a deserter on Christmas Eve, while Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas plays diegetically, was inspired by a real incident but was considered too provocative for American audiences. The film received a polarized reception, with European critics praising its unflinching depiction of war's dehumanizing effects, while American reviewers criticized its bleak outlook. The Guardian called it the most honest portrayal of Allied soldiers ever committed to film, noting its unflattering depictions of looting, sexual exploitation of local women, and casual cruelty. Despite an all-star cast including George Peppard, George Hamilton, and Albert Finney, the film's commercial failure and 3-hour runtime have kept it from wider recognition, though war film historians consider it a vital counterpoint to more heroic narratives of the Allied advance. The War Lover, 1962. This psychological drama stars Steve McQueen as a B-17 bomber pilot whose enthusiasm for combat masks deeper psychological disturbances. Shot entirely in England with a predominantly British crew, the film explores the thin line between courage and pathology among airmen conducting daylight bombing raids over Germany. Director Philip Leacock, working from a screenplay by Howard Koch, Casablanca, secured extraordinary cooperation from the Royal Air Force, which provided actual airfields and period aircraft for the production. The aerial sequences feature some of the most realistic bombing mission footage of the era, using a combination of restored B-17s and meticulous miniature work that still impresses today. Critics praised McQueen's against-type performance as the disturbed Captain Buzz Rickson, with the New York Times noting his chilling portrayal of combat addiction. The film's exploration of the psychological impact of sustained bombing campaigns broke new ground, with aviation historian Robert S. Hopkins calling it the first film to seriously examine what we now recognize as combat stress disorder among air crews. Despite its psychological depth and technical achievements, the film has been overshadowed by more straightforward aerial combat films, though military psychologists have cited it in academic works on combat trauma. The Amorous Adventures of Maul, Flanders, 1965. Though primarily known as a bawdy period comedy, this adaptation of Daniel Defoe's novel contains a significant and often overlooked war sequence showing the brutal reality of 17th century warfare. Terence Stamp plays a soldier who takes Maul, Kim Novak, to Flanders, where he fights in the 9 Years' War, while she disguises herself as a male soldier to remain close to him. Director Terrence Young, who had directed the early James Bond films, brought his action expertise to the battle sequences, creating startlingly realistic combat scenes that contrast sharply with the film's otherwise comedic tone. The production employed military historians to ensure period accuracy in the weapons, tactics, and conditions of warfare in the 1690s, a conflict rarely depicted in cinema. While most critics focused on the film's comedy and romance elements, several noted the power of its war sequences. The Monthly Film Bulletin praised the unflinching depiction of 17th century combat that feels jarringly modern in its brutality, while military historian Richard Holmes later cited it as one of the few accurate portrayals of pre-Napoleonic warfare in popular cinema. The film's marketing as a ribald comedy has obscured its significant contribution to war cinema, particularly in depicting a historical conflict seldom shown on screen. The Charge of the Light Brigade, 1968. This meticulous historical drama reconstructs the disastrous Crimean War cavalry charge immortalized by Tennyson's poem. Director Tony Richardson deliberately subverts heroic war movie traditions, portraying the charge as the result of aristocratic incompetence and toxic class divisions within the British military establishment. Richardson employed a unique visual approach, interrupting the live-action narrative with animated sequences designed by Richard Williams that caricature the British ruling class and military leadership as pompous buffoons. The technique was revolutionary for its time, creating a satirical commentary that frames the historically accurate battle sequences. The film polarized critics and audiences, with its anti-establishment message proving particularly controversial. The Telegraph condemned it as a deliberate attack on British military traditions, while The Guardian praised its necessary correction to a century of myth-making. Despite starring Trevor Howard and Vanessa Redgrave, the film's commercial failure has kept it from wider recognition, though film scholars now regard it as a pivotal work in the evolution of the anti-war film and a key text in Britain's 1960s cultural reassessment of its imperial past. The Seventh Dawn, 1964. This tense jungle drama, set during the Malayan emergency, stars William Holden as a former British officer turned plantation owner caught between his guerrilla fighter friend and the colonial authorities. Though technically an American production, the film was shot entirely in British Malaya with a predominantly British crew and supporting cast, including Susanna York. Director Lewis Gilbert, who would later helm the James Bond film You Only Live Twice, insisted on filming in actual jungle locations where insurgent fighting had occurred just years earlier. The production employed former British military advisors who had fought in the emergency alongside Malayan actors who had lived through the conflict, creating an uncommon authenticity rarely seen in colonial-era films. The film drew controversy for its moral ambiguity, refusing to portray either the British authorities or the communist guerrillas as wholly right or wrong. The New Statesman called it a rare examination of Britain's messy colonial withdrawal, while the Times praised its unflinching portrayal of the violent birth of a post-colonial nation. Despite its strong performances and stunning cinematography, the film's complex politics and uncomfortable portrayal of British colonial policies led to it being quietly forgotten as Britain continued to grapple with its imperial legacy. Submarine X1, 1968. This taut naval thriller stars James Caan as a British submarine commander leading a dangerous mission to sink the German battleship Lindendorf in a Norwegian fjord using miniature submarines. Though featuring an American lead, the film was produced in Britain with a British director and primarily British cast and crew. Director William Graham insisted on technical authenticity, filming with actual X-class midget submarines provided by the Royal Navy and shooting underwater sequences in Scottish lochs, similar to the Norwegian fjords depicted in the story. The film was based on actual X-craft operations against the German battleship Tirpitz, with several technical advisors who had participated in the real mission. Critics praised the film's suspenseful underwater sequences and attention to technical detail, with Variety noting its documentary-like precision in portraying submarine warfare's claustrophobic reality. Despite positive reviews, the film was overshadowed by bigger-budget submarine films and has been largely forgotten, though naval historians value it for accurately portraying one of the war's most daring special operations. The film's focus on a lesser-known aspect of naval warfare, midget submarines and their high-risk missions, makes it particularly significant for military history enthusiasts. Tunes of Glory, 1960. This psychological chamber drama set in a Scottish Highland Regiment post-Badu pits two radically different officers against each other in a battle for the regiment's soul. Alec Guinness plays the rough, battle-hardened acting commander beloved by his men, while John Mills portrays the Oxford-educated, by-the-book replacement who threatens to upset the established order. Director Ronald Neame shot the film in a real Scottish barracks in the dead of winter, with temperatures so cold that whiskey was genuinely needed between takes, much like the characters themselves rely on it. The claustrophobic setting intensifies the psychological warfare between the two men, making the regiment itself a pressure cooker for post-war trauma and class tension. Critics recognized the film's brilliance immediately, with The Guardian calling it a devastating portrait of masculinity in crisis, while Dilys Powell praised its unflinching examination of how the warrior mentality becomes destructive in peacetime. The film was nominated for a Golden Globe, but has since been overshadowed by more combat-focused war films, despite offering one of cinema's most insightful looks at how military men struggle when the fighting stops. Counterpoint, 1968. This overlooked drama stars Charlton Heston as a world-famous conductor whose symphony orchestra is captured by the Germans during the Battle of the Bulge. A Nazi general and classical music enthusiast forces them to perform private concerts while planning their execution. Though American-financed, the film was shot at Britain's Pinewood Studios with a predominantly British crew and supporting cast. Director Ralph Nelson insisted on musical authenticity, requiring the actors playing orchestra members to learn the actual fingering for their instruments. The film's centerpiece, a performance of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, was recorded with the actual London Symphony Orchestra and meticulously lip-synced by the actors under the guidance of musical consultants. Critics praised the film's unusual premise, but were divided on its execution. The Guardian called it a fascinating exploration of art's role in humanizing warfare, while Variety dismissed it as highbrow hokum. Despite its mixed reception, the film offered a unique perspective on war rarely explored in cinema, the fate of artists and cultural figures caught in conflict. Its failure at the box office has relegated it to obscurity, though classical music enthusiasts have kept its memory alive through festival screenings. Invasion Quartet, 1961. This offbeat war comedy follows four injured British officers who escape from their military hospital to embark on a private mission to destroy a new German superweapon. Bill Travers and Spike Milligan lead the eccentric band of misfits in what begins as a madcap adventure, but evolves into something more poignant about wounded men seeking purpose. Director J. Lewis balanced the comedic elements with surprising moments of genuine danger and pathos, particularly in scenes showing the men struggling with their various injuries during the mission. The film's unusual tone, veering from Ealing-style comedy to tense action sequences, made it difficult to market, but created a uniquely British take on the war film that acknowledged both heroism and absurdity. Critics were divided, with some dismissing it as service comedy fluff, while others recognized its subtler qualities. The Monthly Film Bulletin praised its wry commentary on the need for heroism among those the war has already broken, while filmmaker John Boorman later cited it as an influence, noting its ability to find humor in desperation without diminishing the stakes. The film's commercial failure has kept it in obscurity, though comedy historians have begun re-evaluating it as an important bridge between the service comedies of the 1950s and the more satirical war films that would emerge later. These forgotten British war films reveal a side of military cinema that Hollywood rarely touched. Morally complex, often cynical, and unafraid to question notions of heroism and national mythology. From claustrophobic jungle huts to scorching deserts, they capture the psychological toll of warfare beyond the battlefield glory. So, which of these overlooked classics deserves the most urgent rediscovery? Is British war cinema inherently more honest about combat than its American counterparts? Or have we lost something vital in modern filmmaking's obsession with spectacle over human complexity? The comments section awaits your battle plans.